We are now live.
All right, good evening, everyone. The meeting of the Committee of Whole Planning and Administration is now called to order. Before we proceed, I would like to note to a member in the audience today that the chair has been made aware that you've received a 30-day suspension from council chambers during city council meetings, meetings of the Committee of the Whole Planning and Administration, and meetings of the Committee of the Whole Operations. Your presence here today is in violation of that suspension and the city's procedural bylaw. As the chair of tonight's meeting, I have the authority under the city's procedural bylaw to expel you from council chambers. My authority to do so comes from sections 15.7.2, chair duties. The duties of the chair at the meeting shall include, but are not limited to, the following: maintaining order and preserving decorum at the meeting. Section 15.7.9, the power to expel for improper conduct. The chair may expel any person other than a member for improper conduct at a meeting. Section 15.7.11, decorum, rules to be obeyed. Persons addressing council or its committee or observing of a meeting of council or its committees shall conduct themselves with decorum and shall obey the rules of the chair in the conduct of the meeting. Any person who is not a member of council who contravenes any provision of this section may be expelled from the meeting by the chair. I'm hereby exercising my authority under these sections to expel you from council chambers. So the individual in the audience, I'm please asking you to remove yourself from council chambers at this point. You will be permitted to participate in this meeting electronically if you wish to delegate to any item on today's agenda, as you have registered, and you may do so electronically as long as you have complied with all other sections of the city's procedural bylaws. I'm going to call a short recess while we address this concern. Continue with the regular scheduled meeting. So I'd ask everyone to rise as you're able for the reading of the invocation. As we come together today, we recognize the great responsibilities laid upon us. Our council will always strive to understand the needs of the people we serve and to use power wisely and well. Our purpose is to establish and maintain a city of prosperity, righteousness, where freedom prevails and where justice rules. Let us also not forget those who served our community and who are no longer with us, so that we can continue to do the work that we must in their memory. We can have a seat. Clerk, can you confirm that roll call has been taken?
Through the chair, roll call has been taken.
Perfect. Members of the committee, any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none. Separated items for consideration and consent. Members of the committee, are there any items for consideration or consent that you would like to separate for discussion purposes? Noting that item 7.1.3 will automatically be separated as there is a delegation. Councillor Samwell.
7.1.1, please.
That is the notice of intention to demolish an accessory structure.
Yes, that's correct.
Any others? Councillor McCreary.
Sorry, just wanted to make sure that we've confirmed that 9.1 is going to be advanced with a waive tonight.
It might be advanced with a waive should the committee decide that they are interested in waiving the rules. Yes.
I was actually asking you to rule on that.
Are you looking for more airtime, or are we just asking for something to be separated?
I am trying to emulate the chair. Yes.
Thank you. Any other items for separation? All right, seeing none. Councillor Carpenter, I'd ask you to make the motion to approve all the items not separated for discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Moved by myself, seconded by my ward mate, Councillor Linda Hunt, that the items up for consideration at 7.1 and 7.2 not separated for discussion purposes be approved.
Clerk, I'll ask you to read the titles of all of the items subject to the vote. and then we'll call the vote.
The following items are subject to the vote. Item 712, road closure, portion of Winarden Court, and 721 minutes.
I'm not in it yet.
All items not separated for discussion purposes carries unanimously on a recorded vote of 11-0. Members of council voting in favor are as follows: Councilors Sokoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Sluss, Martin, McCreary, Carpenter, Hunt, Samuel, Van Toborg, and Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's no statutory public hearings on the agenda today, but we do have possibly 2 delegations, and we do have a late delegation who came forward. We have Haley Bateman looking to speak to item 8.1, which is improving the municipal code of conduct. So I'll need, I see Councillor Samuel one step ahead of me, seconded by Councillor Hunt, looking to waive the rules to allow for a late delegation. So we'll have to call the vote on that before proceeding.
The waiving of the rules to permit a late delegation carries on a recorded vote of 9-2. Members of council vote in favor are as follows: Councilors Sullivan, Sluss, Hunt, Samuel, Carpenter, Martin, Caputo, Sokoli, Mayor Davis. Members opposed, Councilors McCreary and Van Toborg.
Thank you. Now, before hearing the delegations, I'd like to remind those in the meeting today that the following rules of decorum as set forth in the city's procedural bylaws do apply, as we've become quite accustomed to this evening. No person shall display any sign, banner, or place card in the meeting room other than materials that, in the opinion of the chair, are legitimate audiovisual aids necessary in connection with any presentation to be made to council. All persons present shall use polite and respectful language and shall refrain from the use of any language or the making of any gesture that is disrespectful or offensive. All persons addressing council shall speak only on the subject in the debate and shall not speak on any other subject. No person shall applaud participants in debate or engage in conversation or behavior that may disrupt the proceedings of the meeting. Okay, so we will move forward first and foremost to Murray Angus, Bill Hyde, and John Utley. You'll be speaking to item 6.1.2, which is the Brant Historical Society. I'll now ask the representatives to come on up, pick a microphone. If you turn it, you'll hit one of the buttons when it lights up red, you're live. And I'll remind you that you have 10 minutes for your presentation, and that's inclusive of questions from this committee. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. We're here basically to maybe clarify the situation of the Brant Historical Society at the moment. I know there's been lots of news and talk about things that have happened in the recent months. But we come before you as board members of the Brant Historical Society, and we're seeking your support for some emergency funding in the amount of $50,000 to help us as we implement a new 3-year financial and operational plan to secure a stable financial future. With a new board and a chair in place, we are undertaking a thorough review of past practices and implementing a much more robust method and processes in handling the business of the Historical Society. We inherited a rather complicated mess when I became chair of the board earlier this year. And a summary of what we inherited is here. I think you have copies of this. We discovered that the BHS is in dire financial situation. We discovered a mortgage was due on the Crystal Cottage Foundation with no funds to meet that obligation. The board decided to sell the Crystal Cottage to a local contractor who specializes in renovations. Cottage was sold to pay the mortgage and to meet the requirements of the agreement with the city. We discovered there was no plan or direction in place to pay that mortgage that had been taken out on the building. The Brant Historical Society relied almost exclusively on the endowment fund to operate the organization. And the endowment fund has virtually been depleted over the last 7 years. And this was very heartbreaking because this was done without the consent of the general membership of the Historical Society, which was clearly part of the bylaws of the endowment fund originally. And then the latest copy of the bylaws of the endowment fund don't even have any room in them for borrowing money or taking money from the endowment fund. So this has been quite a concern. And what we are really focused on is replenishing this endowment fund to obviously a larger amount than was there and had been left to us. And the Historical Society we were dangerously close to not meeting our financial obligations on a month-to-month basis. To say we were on the precipice of being no longer is not an exaggeration. We were literally within months, a couple of months of having no money and no way of paying our obligations to staff. We only have 3 staff members. We have a volunteer executive director. Everyone else is volunteer. Our staff is not overpaid by any stretch of the imagination. We have people working at minimum wage, trying to keep a handle on the 15,000 artifacts that are in the possession of the Historical Society. We have 15,000 artifacts and we have more than 12,000 photographs of Brantford's history. So I felt it was crucial that I put together a board that had the ability or has the ability to see the future and to see what our needs will be. And our new treasurer, Bill Hyde, who is a retired partner from Millards. Bill has taken on the role as treasurer and has created a 3-year plan, which has been shared with the mayor and with the CAO, Brian Hutchings. The immediate need for funding, though, now is to help us operate over the next 12 months while we work on a longer-term solution. We did a SWOT analysis that has been completed, which we are using to prioritize our short, medium, and long-term solutions. And our request for emergency funding is critical to our ability to operate in the immediate term. We have about 3 different variations of plans, none of which are at a level to share at this point, really. But it's going to involve us raising enough money to pay back the endowment fund. And with any luck, we want to increase that endowment fund to help make us somewhat self-sufficient from the city. And we think this can be done over the long term, not over the next 3 years, but certainly over the next number of years. And we're prepared to commit to working towards that goal. And the council's assistance and support has been incredibly heartwarming to me, particularly. We've been warmly received whenever we need to talk about possibilities of things that we need to accomplish. And everybody seems to be on board with trying to help us find these solutions. So I would like to take my hat off to the members of council and to our mayor and to our CAO for the listening ear that they have been so gracious to give us. Again, if there's any questions regarding anything financial, that's why Bill is here, or anything that we need to help you clarify, we're here.
We do have a
Thank
few questions for you.
Perfect.
Up first, we have Counselor Carpenter, and we have about 3 minutes left.
Thank you. Murray and Bill and John, thank you for stepping up, you know, at a difficult time. You mentioned $80,000 debt with a community agency. Who was the community agency that that you had $80,000 debt?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite.
Community agency had $80,000 debt. Who's that?
Enterprise Grant, and we've been speaking with Sarah McClellan and the chair.
Glenn
Glenn
Christensen.
Christensen. They've given us a 3-month
Reprieve.
reprieve on any payments on that debt. And they've indicated they may be considering writing it off.
Okay, and the Crystal Cottage, is that foundation debt been addressed?
That, we sold the cottage, paid off the mortgage. Yes,
So
thank you.
that's been handled?
That's been dealt with.
Who was in charge previously?
In charge,
Yes,
Tim Philp.
Tim Phillip.
Tim Philp was the chairman of the board for, I believe, 7 years.
Okay, you mentioned about money being taken from the endowment fund. Do you consider this misappropriation of funds when you move money from one place without
Well,
the board
that's,
permission?
that's a very interesting question because I don't really know.
We're currently seeking legal advice on that,
Okay.
and I have an appointment set up, but
Yeah.
we haven't been able to take that appointment as yet.
Okay, I won't go any further, but again, thank you, all three of you for your work with the Historical Society and the community in this council. I know takes it very seriously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Counselor McCreary.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Welcome, guys. It's always a pleasure when the alumni come back to visit.
He
It's
can't hear
unfortunate,
you.
it's unfortunate you had to share in the sideshow that we saw a few minutes ago. Beyond our control, but I feel the need to apologize for that anyways. So we are doing everything we can in our power to help you out, if I understand correctly, right?
Yes, you are.
And Murray, I'm going to ask you specifically, would it be of interest to you folks to eventually be in a spanking new building owned and operated by the city of Brantford in which you could operate your community outreach and tell your story?
Yes.
Thank you.
I don't think I need to expand on that. Absolutely.
Thank you. We have about 20 seconds left, so unless I see someone who wants to extend the time, Counselor Caputo. Okay, go ahead, Counselor Caputo.
Thank you, gentlemen. Pleasure. Great to see you here. Real quick question. The money get you through this year plans or somewhat of a plan going forward for the upcoming year without this money? What do you got going on?
We're considering selling the building at 57 Charlotte Street. That's the only way out.
The only asset we have that we can get any money from. We can't sell the artifacts. We can't, you're not allowed to sell the artifacts. If you do sell an artifact, the law says you have to use that money to reacquire more artifacts. So you can sell something that doesn't belong to your collection, that doesn't really have any relevance to Brantford, but you need to buy something with that money. The only asset we have is our building at 57 Charlotte. And we are looking at a couple of different options, and we've had an appraisal done on the building. And that may be what it comes down to, and we move into something less expensive or free.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here tonight, guys.
Thank
We
you.
just exceeded our time. You squeezed that in. Thank you so much. I'll ask that you take a seat. We'll move on. We have 2 other delegations and then we'll get to this item shortly, okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, up next, we do have looking to speak to item 6.1.1 Winarden Enterprise that is permitted to speak virtually. Do we have them online? Okay, I don't see that individual here, so we'll move forward. We have Haley Bateman, who is tuning in virtually. Haley will be speaking to item 8.1, which is the legislative amendment in improving the code of conduct. So Haley, there you are.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so very much.
You'll have 10 minutes, Haley, okay?
Thank you. Sorry, let me just, can you still see me, Chair?
Yes, we can see you.
Perfect. Thank you for permitting me to speak tonight. I was very, very late in my registration. I'm here to speak about the Municipal Act and hopefully provide a little bit of background on why we need to hold municipally elected officials accountable for workplace violence and harassment. This was something that I went to Queen's Park to speak about. This is something that I've advocated for over my career, and that's where I'll begin. So I was, prior to being elected, I am a regional councillor for the municipality of St. Catharines in the Niagara region. But prior to being elected, I worked in women's shelters. And in fact, my first real introduction to how policy can affect positive change was Bill 168. And that was workplace violence and harassment under the Occupational Health and Safety Act way back in 2009. This was an incredible moment for survivors of violence, and it was a profound shift in the accountability and legislation, undoubtedly saving lives. So we knew then what we know now, that there was and is still a gap in this legislation. So elected officials are exempt from this legislation, which is astounding to me. And I don't think that a lot of people know this. So that is why I'm here tonight. So 15 years later, we are on the cusp of closing that gap and ensuring that every working Ontarian has the same rights and the same protections under the law. So what happens when we do not act immediately after an incident of violence or harassment? We know statistically that the abuse continues. It may continue in other forms, and there have been dozens of reported incidents of violence and harassment of and from elected officials that range from physical, sexual, discrimination, and institutional abuse. We can and we do have a responsibility to protect it. So in 2018, Municipal World reported that 77% of staff reported harassment and bullying by elected officials, with 76% stating that they had personally been at the receiving end of harassment by a member of council. We can, we must, and we will make every effort to prevent this from continuing. This legislation is vital to the safety of those working in municipal government, and it's vital to a healthy and democratic space for us all to continue in. So as a councillor and a member of the LGBTQ2 community, I can tell you that debates are an important part of what we do, and this legislation has been debated. It's been talked about. It is very much nonpartisan legislation. We have heard in our advocacy from every party, everyone on all sides of this debate that it needs to pass and it needs to be done correctly. There is legislation that is coming up in October. We're asking you to do what the Niagara region did and over 200 municipalities across our province is to support this legislation. Sharing and understanding different perspectives and our lived experience is vital to the progress of communities that we represent. Above all, we have to create a safe environment for everyone to participate fully. So I ask tonight that you consider this, that you put your name and your city's reputation in supporting this legislation. It's going to be talked about at AMO. I will be at AMO. I look forward to seeing you all there. And I hope that you pass it unanimously tonight as the Niagara region did. Thank you for your time, Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for coming out at the last minute, Haley. And I look forward to seeing you at AMO. I don't see anybody with their hands up to ask any question. Oh, sorry, I do have one. Councillor Hunt.
Haley, thank you for coming and speaking to us. I've heard several versions of this legislation circulated, one through the provincial legislature that was, I believe, not passed. And it's now coming through through AMOC. So can you speak to, I think there are some misconceptions based on the activities of some people that were in chambers this morning, but the specifically who the legislation is aimed at protecting, and what types of conduct we would be considering.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Hunt. So the legislation did come last year. It wasn't passed, but it went back to the drawing board. As I said, everybody on all sides of in each party believe in the legislation. So we want to make sure that we get it right, and we're really grateful that it's coming back and a little bit better each time. So this legislation looks to prevent egregious actions from councillors to municipal staff or councillor to councillor. And when we think about that, we think about the lever of power and control that we have as councillors, and the responsibility is huge. We need to protect staff from that. And there, a simple Google search, and I thought about putting it in my presentation, but I chose not to. It can be very hard to talk about. If you do a simple Google search about what some councillors have been doing to their staff or to staff at the municipality, or councillor to councillor, it is very, very shocking. Disagreements, heated debates, those are great. We welcome those. I don't think any councillor would be in a position to run if that's not something that you like to do, or take pride in, and leaving it at the table and walking away as friends and colleagues. But this is egregious actions. The really interesting thing about legislation that's coming up, that we're asking you to support tonight, is it takes it out of the hands of council. Each council wouldn't be responsible for deciding their colleague's fate. It would go to an integrity commissioner board, and they would decide if the councillor's actions were egregious, and would they be removed from council. And if I could just say one more thing, Councillor Hunt, just on your question, the removal process, I think a lot of people have an issue with, but there is a removal process already in place in the Municipal Act for conflict of interest. So here we're talking about sexual abuse, we're talking about violence, we're talking about threats and intimidation. Those are huge things that we need to take seriously. And if we want a more diverse, a more respected council, and if we want debates and decorum, then this is something that needs to pass. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you very much, Haley.
Thank you, Haley. And we do have one additional question coming from Councillor McCreary.
I may have two. Thanks for coming tonight. Well, virtually, at least anyway. It would have been nice to have you in person, but it's a long drive. So City of Brantford does have a very, very, very robust code of conduct, and we also have a very robust health and safety set of regulations. I'm wondering if you've had a chance to look at that, and if you could give us your opinion of what we have in place currently.
No, sir, I have not, Councillor McCreary. But what I will tell you is that the purpose of this legislation is so that not every individual municipality or region has to make these decisions. It is standardized across the board. And I think that is a problem that we have. It would be like saying, prior to Bill 168 coming in, we would have hoped that businesses would have had workplace violence and harassment legislation. Now it's standardized. Now it's become law. So this would be the same thing for that legislation. I hope I did. Just the one.
Thank you so much. And I see no further questions for you, Haley. Thank you so much. I'll see you at AMO.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so that concludes our delegations for this evening. So we'll move forward into our items for consideration and consent. And there was a delegation for the resolution 8.1, the legislative amendments to the improved municipal codes of conduct and enforcement. And we'll consider that item prior to moving into our other items for consideration. So Councillor Samwell, I'm going to ask you to state your seconder and read your resolution to put it on the floor.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Hunt. whereas all Ontarians deserve and expect a safe, respectable workplace, and whereas municipal governments as a democratic institutions most directly engaged with Ontarians need respectful discourse, and whereas several incidents in recent years of abuse and workplace harassment have occurred amongst members of municipal councils, and whereas these incidents seriously and negatively affect the people involved and lower the public perception of local governments, and whereas municipal codes of conduct are helpful tools to set expectations of council members' behavior, and whereas legislation would hold both accountable and protect all municipal offices, and whereas municipal governments do not have the necessary tools to adequately enforce compliance with municipal codes of conduct and support appropriate accountability when it comes to perpetrating violence and harassment in the workplace, and whereas the fundamental underlying principle of broadening diversity, equity, and inclusion in politics rests on the assumption of a safe workplace, and whereas the government legislation would require councillors to comply with workplace violence and harassment policies, establish a process for removing individuals in substantiated cases of egregious violence and harassment, as well as prevent officials whose seats have been vacated for such reasons from seeking immediate and subsequent re-election. And whereas the affirmation elements are consistent with previously developed legislation, as well as current legislation tabled Bill 207, Municipally Accountable and Integrity Act 2024. Now, therefore, it be resolved, the Corporation of the City of Brantford supports the call of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, the Rural Ontario Municipal Association, the Ontario Municipal Administrators Association, Association of Municipal Managers, Clerks, and Treasurers of Ontario, and more than 207 municipalities for the Government of Ontario to introduce legislation to strengthen municipal codes of conduct and compliance with them in consultation with municipal governments. That the legislation encompasses updating municipal codes of conduct to account for workplace safety and harassment, creating a flexible administration penalty regime adapted to local economic and financial circumstances of municipalities across Ontario, increasing training of municipal integrity commissioners to enhance consistency of investigations and recommendations across the province, amending the Municipal Act 2001 to require the establishment of a Board of Integrity Commissioners, amending both the Municipal Act 2021 and the Toronto Act 2006 to allow a commissioner of the Board of Integrity Commissioners to make an application for judicial review to vacate a member's seat and impose prescribed penalties if the commissioner is of the opinion that the member has made contraventions of the code of conduct, adding provisions to both acts to allow the commissioner to seek confirmation of certain determinations from a judge of the Superior Court, introducing provisions to prohibit a member who has been removed from office for running in an election for the remainder of their term and subsequent term, and that a copy of the resolution be forwarded to Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Paul Calandra, Attorney General Doug Downey, Charmaine Williams, Associate Minister of the Women's Social and Economic Opportunity, Will Bouma, Member of Provincial Parliament, Larry Brock, Member of Parliament, and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. Okay. And now to speak to that. All right, so I want to thank everyone who's reached out to have productive dialogue on this issue so that we can ensure every working person in Ontario, including municipal staff and fellow councillors, have the basic workplace protections afforded in every other workplace. As we all know, there are many good people that serve the people as elected representatives. However, like every sector, there are people who are guilty of perpetrating harassment in the workplace. Unfortunately, one does not have to look far to find examples such as Barrie, Ottawa, Mississauga, and Brampton as to why this legislation is so necessary. In every other workplace in Ontario, employees are held to violence and harassment in the workplace policies. Currently, there is no legislation that provides an appropriate mechanism for the accountability for municipally elected representatives when it comes to perpetrating harassment. This is about appropriately addressing violence and harassment, not about restricting productive dialogue where councillors and municipal staff may not agree. This legislation will be preventative in nature, given people are motivated to engage in recommended remedial action when they know that non-compliance could lead to removal. The entire idea, if introduced, removal would never have to be pursued, as it will only be considered in the most egregious of cases. Additionally, these are democratically elected positions, and any consideration of removal would be elevated for judicial review, which is more due diligence than any other workplace in Ontario. In fact, currently in the Municipal Act, a councillor can be removed for conflict of interest. As such, we know this is constitutional, as removal of an elected official already exists. Many people may say we have police for this reason, but unfortunately, not all harassment is considered criminal. We are asking for this legislation that is in line with every other workplace wherein recommendations for action are made on an investigation based on balance of probabilities. Again, I believe this is critical. I believe this is critical. Elected representatives remind themselves that they are not above the people, but of the people. As such, this legislation is not to be feared, but a legislation we unfortunately must recognize as necessary to ensuring basic workplace safety for all. You cannot obtain diversity of voice at the decision-making table when the baseline level, the workplace, is unsafe. I hope tonight we as a council will stand with the other 207 municipalities already in support and say no to workplace violence and harassment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Samwell. I have Councillor Sullivan up next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually have an amendment, so if there's anybody else who wants to talk to the original, I would be more than happy to let them go first.
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. This to me is a no-brainer. There are 207 municipalities that have already backed this legislation. Unfortunately, legislation very similar to this was working its way through the provincial legislature. It was called Bill 5, I believe, and did not pass, which how someone could vote down legislation that promotes workplace harassment, either, and as Councillor Samwell has pointed out, councillor to councillor or councillor to staff, how someone could vote that down just totally blows my mind. I would never understand it. And it's unfortunate that we have to bring this type of resolution forward, but the reality of the world we live in today is that this harassment, workplace harassment and violence does occur. And so for that reason, I'm fully supportive of the resolution. And I believe that if we look at AMO, and one of their priorities is the Healthy Democracy Project, and it's very hard to get healthy democracy when people who are potentially somewhat marginalized feel that they're going to be harassed if they were to run and be successful for municipal council seats. So again, fully supportive of it for that reason. And the fact that we have 444 municipalities in the province of Ontario, and almost half of them have already passed this legislation. I think we would have a hard time defending why we would be a municipality that would not support it.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Before we get into the amendment, and I don't see anyone else looking to speak, I'll say a few words.
Just by way of background, this piece of legislation was born from a group called the Women of Ontario Say No. Don't get scared, gentlemen. It's actually very much not gender exclusive in one way or the other. It's inclusive of all genders who are harassing staff and vice versa. But during our Women in Governance panel that we held earlier this year, we did have a Representative Emily McIntosh. She's a spokesperson for Women of Ontario Say No, and she's incredibly vibrant and intelligent and passionate. And we were very privileged to have the opportunity to speak to her and find out what this group of incredibly prominent women are doing here in Ontario. This movement does stem from a lack of tools in the Municipal Act toolbox for holding elected officials accountable for workplace harassments. We have elected officials. We have this tremendous amount of responsibility to uphold ourselves to a much higher standard. We should be acting with a very strong moral compass and a measure of integrity in how we conduct ourselves, yet we have the fewest repercussions for ejecting councillors who are exhibiting egregious behaviors. Do methods exist for staff to file complaints or councillors to file complaints? Yes, they do, but it leaves staff persons in a very vulnerable position. It leaves them in a position where they may feel that their job is at risk. And there are some councillors out there, not saying here, but out there that do demonstrate these intimidating behaviors when dealing with staff and sort of pushing agendas that staff may not want to, may not see best fit for the community that they're working for. So is this important? Absolutely. Will I be supporting it? Yes. Not quite sure what this amendment is coming forward, but a tremendous amount of work has gone into putting together this resolution, not just here at the City of Brantford, but across Ontario, and much higher tiers of government have come together and put this together, and it's sort of molded itself into what we have before us today. So on that note, I'm gonna zip it and I'm going to pass it on to Councillor Sullivan to bring forward your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First and foremost, I also will be supporting this. However, I think there needs to be a clause D, because unfortunately, the world we do live in, people are not prone, but it has happened in the past where false, vexatious, and malicious accusations have been made against people that have been found to be untrue. In those cases, the amendment that I would like to put in is that the Integrity Commissioner or the group be empowered to actually penalize whoever's filed the complaint knowing that it was untrue. And it's seconded by Councillor Van Tilburg.
Can we see wording on that on the screen, please? And is there anyone in line who'd like to speak to the amendment? Once we see it up? I know, I'm just getting ahead of the. Okay. Pump your ropes, guys. Don't be. So I see Councillor saying. So clause D is that the Integrity Commissioner will be empowered to penalize frivolous and vexatious complaints. Up first, speaking strictly to the amendment, I have Councillor Samwell.
So I just wanted to say that I will not be supporting this amendment. I don't feel that it's in the spirit of what we're trying to do with this resolution as a whole. And I think that it will actually create barriers for people wanting to come forward and do the right thing. So I won't be supporting this.
Thank you, Counselor Samwell. Counselor McCreary.
Madam Chair, thank you very much for this. I was hoping there might be a member of staff that would be able to answer a question. I see one right there. A member of staff who might be able to answer a question. Through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Hutchings. In the current legislation and City of Brantford Code of Conduct, does the Integrity Commissioner currently make recommendation regarding penalties? And I'm asking that because I don't know. We've had a number of frivolous and vexatious complaints made against members of this council. None have been found worthy of proceeding. So it's a question we don't know, and I'm wondering if staff would know the answer to that.
You're going to turn that over to the clerk who handles the work with the Integrity Commissioner?
Through the chair, currently our code of conduct permits the Integrity Commissioner to deem complaints frivolous and vexatious. And however, there are no penalties associated with the deeming of those complaints as frivolous and vexatious. There's not a lot of additional costs for the Integrity Commission to have to investigate if he deems it frivolous or her deems it frivolous and vexatious.
Thank you, Mr. Gauthier. In the event, the unlikely event that a complaint would be upheld by the Integrity Commissioner, would it be the Integrity Commissioner's job to tell council what they should levy in way of a penalty against the offender, the convicted offender?
Through the chair, there are currently no provisions in the code of conduct that speak to that.
No provisions. So legitimately, then, could this be added to our code of conduct to offer a penalty or perhaps even a deposit for folks who have done this maybe once or twice?
So are you asking questions about the main motion or the
About the
amendment? Because we're
amendments, ma'am.
speaking,
Yes, about the amendment. The
so
amendment-
you're speaking specifically to penalizing men or women who's vexatious, who files vexatious complaints.
I believe that's what I said.
Okay, just
Yes.
making sure we're staying on
It's
track.
a good thing you're making sure. Yes.
Well, through the chair, I'm a bit confused because right now the amendment is to include that for lobbying the government. I don't really think what we're discussing right now pertains to our code of conduct, but it pertains to what we want to recommend to the government.
So the recommendation is that penalties be affixed for frivolous, vexatious, and I guess weaponized complaints. That's what's before us.
That is the amendment, yes.
Okay. Thank you. And I will have an amendment to add to the amendment.
Perfect.
Would you like me to do that now?
Testing my knowledge of Robert's rules. I love it. It's up to you. I have a few people in the queue. Do you want to?
With your leave, I will. It's
Okay.
minor in nature. And further that the code of conduct requirement for a deposit to be placed with the city of Brantford in the event that frivolous and vexatious complaints have been made by that complainant.
So to be clear, you're asking for someone who may have been harassed to leave a deposit before filing a complaint?
No, harassment is perhaps the key word for the night. We have regulations that deal with harassment. What I'm suggesting is we add to Councillor Sullivan's amendment about the Integrity Commissioner being empowered to penalize such transgressions as false, misleading, vexatious, scurrilous complaints weaponizing our system, to include the Integrity Commissioner requirement that previous frivolous and vexatious complainants be required to post a deposit with the city of Brantford to have their further complaints adjudicated.
Point of order, please.
Well,
Madam
yes.
Chair, I ask that you would rule that we're talking about a recommendation to the province.
To the municipal act.
Yes, and
Yes.
the amendment talks about City of Brantford's code of conduct, and that's not on the agenda.
The amendment to the amendment is speaking to the code of conduct, so I'm gonna uphold that ruling that it's out of order.
So let me
Speaking-
rephrase. that it be amended could we have the amendment back on the screen, please? Be empowered to penalize frivolous and vexatious complaints and require a deposit or same in future. If that's clear enough, I'm not sure it is.
So in order to file a complaint, you would have to leave a deposit
Following a frivolous and vexatious
and then you
complaint.
would lose the deposit if it's frivolous. Is that what you're suggesting here
Correct.
today?
Yes, that is
Thank
what
you.
I'm suggesting.
And you've exceeded your time. So anyone want to speak to the amendment of the amendment?
I don't know.
We're on the amendment to the amendment, which is taking a deposit. Follow me here, guys. Do we have a seconder? Counselor Martin seconding that. So it's on the floor. The amendment to the amendment is that we take a deposit from individuals. I see Counselor Hunt looking to speak to that. Oh, sorry, Counselor Caputo. I thought you wanted to wait. Go ahead, Counselor Caputo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not quite sure if this is the actual arena we should be discussing this in. I think the motion that was brought forth in the resolution by Councillor Slamwell is very, very good. And it actually hits to the issues that we need to talk about. And anything added to this should be something that we should be looking at from an internal code of conduct and should be done something from within our own city and the corporation to be putting it in. And I don't believe that this is the arena for that. I will not support the amendment, but I will support the motion going forward.
Thank you, Counselor Caputo. Counselor McCreary, you want to turn your microphone off there? You're live.
Good advice, lest I say something that
You
would
never know.
go
sir.
down that road.
Counselor Hunt, you're up next.
Okay, so I just want to be clear here. The amendment is requiring either a staff member that feels like they've been harassed or another counselor that feels like they've been harassed by a member of council to not only have the wherewithal to file a complaint for workplace violence and harassment, but we also want them to pay a deposit. We're not talking about constituents filing vexatious claims here. We're talking about a member of staff that feels like they've been harassed by a counselor or another counselor that feels like they've been harassed by a counselor. So am I clear on what we're asking?
You are clear.
Okay, then I absolutely will not support the amendment.
Thank you. Counselor Martin.
Thank you. I'm hearing two different versions of what this amendment means. The version that I seconded is that someone has to put a deposit down if they've previously made a vexatious complaint. Someone who's making a complaint for the first time does not need to put a deposit down. It's only if they've put down a vexatious complaint previously that they will then need to put down a deposit. The idea is to discourage people repeatedly putting out vexatious claims as a way of weaponizing the code of conduct to harass an individual. So if this actually prevents harassment, it doesn't require a deposit from somebody who's making a complaint for the first time or somebody who's had a legitimate complaint. Only if they've had a vexatious complaint or frivolous complaint. So for that reason, I can support this amendment, but it has to be clear that that is the version that this amendment represents. It's not, everybody has to put a deposit down. Only if they've previously weaponized the system to harass someone.
Seeing no further speakers, I'm just going to let everyone know that I will absolutely not be supporting the amendment to the amendment, nor will I be supporting the amendment, but I won't speak to that. This really just sounds like some people who are maybe really fearful of like a hashtag Me Too movement back in the day, and we're looking to grasp at straws. And I'm not going to support this. I think it's very subjective. I don't think a deposit is appropriate at all. And I think my comments triggered a bunch of individuals to talk. So we're going to go over here to Councillor Carpenter first and then Mayor Davis.
Yes, it did, Madam Chair. What I've heard from previous speakers prior to you was that this is for people that have filed a complaint that wasn't successful. Now, they use the word vexatious and other names for it, but maybe someone may have filed a complaint thinking that it was inappropriate and the integrity commissioner ruled against them. And now they have to pay if they want to file another complaint or if they feel they've been bothered again. So I won't be supporting this amendment to the amendment either. Are we on the amendment to the amendment or was it friendly? But we haven't voted on the amendment to the amendment, have we?
We haven't voted on the amendment to the amendment yet.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Every highly commendable and excellent regulatory system has balance. And I've been involved in a lot of the conversations at AMO and the OBCM about this provision. I mean, there's no doubt that there is a need for it because there have been several very severe examples across Ontario, just starting in Ottawa, of counselors that were clearly sexually harassing constituents.
Point of order.
Of the counselors. I'm trying to explain why there's balance.
The point of
Well,
order
we
is
have
to
to
the,
address the point of order. Another point of order has been made.
the point of order is that the issue on the floor is the amendment to the amendment, which is to make people pay.
If I can
Can,
explain.
can you loop this back to the amendment of the amendment very quickly for me, sir? Thank you.
So there's no doubt that right now there really are no penalties that really deal with that extreme situation. The other problem, though, with the legislation that empowers integrity commissioners and codes of conduct is that there is no way to deal with those who file repeated, vexatious, frivolous, weaponized complaints. Those also exist in the system. And to have a code of conduct and legislation for integrity commissioners that doesn't recognize that and provide a provision to deal with that is legislation that is not properly balanced. The concern I have is I understand what the mover and seconders are doing with the amendment and the amendment of amendment, but the language is too harsh. Like, you don't penalize anybody for bringing a frivolous or vexatious complaint. I don't think deposits are the answer. The court system has, over the centuries, developed a technique which is called costs. You award costs against someone who has brought repeated frivolous and vexatious complaints, or you bar them from filing further applications. And so I'm not going to vote in favor of this amendment or the amendment to the amendment. I think there's a better way to word it and describe it so it's more in accordance with commonly accepted practice in our court system. So if these amendments fail, I would intend to bring forward differently worded amendment that I think addresses the concern that there be a proper balance in what we're asking the province to do.
I'd like to introduce a point of order, Madam Chair.
What would be your point of order?
I think it would be to the benefit of the committee if Madam Chair would rule both the amendments out of order. And we can then accede to Mayor, sorry, I almost called you Mayor Bailey, Mayor Davis's,
Wow. Okay.
Mayor Davis's suggestion that we do this in a less ad hoc manner. And I will withdraw my amendment, hoping the seconder will
Are you
accede to that.
withdrawing the amendment? So the amendment to the amendment has been withdrawn. We still have the original amendment on the floor
I'm willing to withdraw it as well.
and the seconder to that.
Always willing to get something better. Withdraw.
So all of the amendments, despite talking about them for 10 minutes, have been withdrawn. Any further discussion? Mayor Davis.
I'm hoping this can bring this issue of balance into it. So this is a hastily drafted amendment, but I think it's an improvement over what we saw previously. And so would it be D in this? It would be adding a further paragraph D that in addition, the legislation should include a provision allowing an integrity commissioner to award costs against individuals who have filed repeated vexatious or frivolous complaints.
How are those typing skills holding up? I see this amendment seconded by Councillor McCurry. And we'll pull that up on the screen. And would you like to speak? Paul?
Yeah, so I don't think there should ever be any kind of penalty or sanction against someone who brings forward what an integrity commissioner deems to be a frivolous or vexatious complaint. So you do that in the first instance, the impact is you discourage legitimate applicants from filing a complaint with the integrity commissioner. But we do know that people use codes of conduct as weapons against their political foes. And generally you see that when they bring repeated complaints, repetitive complaints that an integrity commissioner deems to be frivolous and vexatious. And right now, there's no way for an integrity commissioner to deal with that, to discourage that. Whereas in the court system, there is a method of dealing with that. So this takes the technique that's used in the court system to deal with those who weaponize the court system or who misuse the court system. And again, the key words are that it's repeated, frivolous or vexatious complaints, and it would allow the integrity commissioner, it wouldn't make it mandatory, but at least give the integrity commissioner the power or the authority to do it where they consider it appropriate.
Counselor Slass.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just, I like what I heard. I just don't understand the one part, and that's repeated. Does that mean someone who's done it once, or do you have to do it 3 times, or do you have to do it 5 times before it's considered that you're a repeater? If I could get clarity on that, I'd appreciate it.
Well, we don't ask questions back and forth. I don't know, maybe clerk would. I see no staff person here. We don't banter back and forth amongst us.
No,
But
I don't want to banter with anybody. I simply want a clarification.
Answer that, Madam Chair. It's Brian Hutchings, City CEO. I think that would be up to the professional judgment of the integrity commissioner, or whoever's investigating this at the time. Counselor Sluss, there's no kind of definition for vexatious, and but it would be up to that decision of that integrity commissioner.
Okay, so he could do that at 1 or at 2 or at 3. It would be his discretion. Am I understanding that correctly?
Looking at the contents and the subject and the complaints, yes, and looking at, if there's repeats and look at vexatious and malicious through that lens, yes, he or she could do that.
Appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Counselor Sullivan.
Just for clarity purposes, I first want to thank the mayor for coming forward with this. I will support this. Originally, that was my intent. It wasn't that if you were deemed that the complaint was null and void or it wasn't merited that you be penalized for it. It was for somebody who was definitely targeting somebody. So I think the mayor addresses that in this.
Seeing no further speakers to the amendment, I'll take, Counselor Samwell.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. So I won't be supporting this amendment. I feel that there's a lot of avenues that we will already be able to believe in the system that's going to be before us to deal with these types of things. And I don't think that this is the right spot to be moving this forward. Thank you.
And seeing no one else, I will just say a few words. I won't be supporting the amendment. I think harassment is subjective. I think that what may be true for one person may not be true for another. And I think this is not in the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish today at all. I think it's small-minded what we're trying to do. I don't think it speaks to where we're trying to go. I don't think it protects our staff. I don't think it makes our staff feel valued when we're trying to manipulate this on the fly because we're afraid of vexatious claims. I'm not supporting it. Seeing no other speakers, let's call the vote on the amendment. Counselor McCurry.
Madam Chair, thank you. I can see that there's a gulf, 2 solitudes that would be with respect to this question. I think some folks on this committee are seeing this from a staff lens. The rest of us are seeing this with respect to the way this code of conduct has been weaponized by a very small group of folks in this community. And weaponized really is the word. And there's one individual within this community who has filed, I'm guessing, somewhere between 5 and 10 of these. And for every one that the integrity commissioner makes public, there is at least one that is not made public because it has no merit whatsoever. And the integrity commissioner finds that there's no benefit to the community, to the council, or to the world for that matter in making it public. These are the types of things that we're trying to deter. And there's only one way to do it. And I thank the mayor for having on the fly crafted a pretty darn good amendment. I would urge everybody to support this and not see it through the lens of staff. Because there are, we do have a robust health and safety and workplace violence and code of conduct that there's probably no better in the province of Ontario. We do a pretty good job here. And I think what the mayor has proposed here makes what's before us a better piece of legislation. One can only hope that it will get read and acted upon rather than going into the official government of Ontario shredder on red.
And reminding everyone, this legislation speaks exclusively to protecting staff and not for the general public filing any codes of conduct. So let's stay on track of what the intention of this is. And I have Councillor Hunt looking to speak to the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm just going to clarify what you said, that this is counselor to counselor or counselor to staff. Harassment or violence. So this has got nothing to do with members of the community filing vexatious complaints with the Integrity Commissioner.
Seeing no further speakers. Mayor Davis,
Yeah, I don't
this is
agree.
your last,
Well, I'm entitled to 2 speaking opportunities, Madam Chair, and
use it well.
I'll use it well. I generally try and use as well as I can. I certainly don't read it that way. I realize that the incidents that this legislation was based on, many of them dealt with municipal staff, but I interpret this to apply to complaints made by members of the public, and certainly they should be allowed to file a complaint if they've been sexually harassed by a member of council. So I don't see how it's limited in that context. But as I said earlier, the best legislation considers all perspectives and provides a balanced piece of legislation. And the problem with the current rules and legislation authorizing codes of conduct and integrity commissioners is it doesn't deal with this issue of, and it exists, which is repeated frivolous and vexatious complaints. You've got to have something in there that deals with that, but at the same time, you got to design it in such a way that it doesn't act as a disincentive or an impediment to someone filing a legitimate complaint. And that's why I think it's really important to include the word repetitive, because that's the standard that a court uses, which that's when you determine that if something's just in one or 2 cases frivolous or vexatious, generally courts won't award costs. But when it's repetitive, so it's clearly someone who's demonstrated a pattern of weaponizing and misusing legislation that's intended for really good purposes. And just having lived a life as a lawyer listening to both sides exist. And I think if you want legislation the government is prepared to move forward with, your recommendation has got to reflect that, I think, to be fair. So I will say.
Well said. Thank you. Seeing no one else. Anyone? You sure? Okay, let's call the vote on the amendment. The most recent amendment, which is the only amendment.
It's not incur costs, award costs. Yeah, that I didn't use the word incur. For sure.
The amendment to item 8.1 is lost on recorded vote of 5 to 6. Members of council voting In favor, Councilors Sullivan, Celeste, McCreary, Marn, Mayor Davis, members opposed, Councilors Sokoli, Caputo, Carpenter, Samuel, Van Toborg, and Hunt.
Okay, any further discussion to the motion that was not amended? Counselor Martin first, then Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In the discussion on this, I was glad to hear that this is something that will be taken out of the hands of council. Because councilors who've been here for a while will remember we had a case a number of years ago where a member of council was found guilty of sexually harassing a female staff member. And amazingly, when it come time to vote on sanctioning his wages, which was the only tool we had in our toolbox at the time, there was actually 3 councilors that voted against sanctioning his wages, including at the time a female member of council, which I found extremely shocking at the time that anybody would vote against it, but especially one that advocates for women's issues on a regular basis. So it's good that this is being taken out of council's hands and the penalties being determined by, I'm assuming, the integrity commissioner themselves. So I'll be supporting this as it stands now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Davis.
Yeah, despite the fact, Madam Chair, that I think this resolution is less than perfect, I'm going to support it because I was trying to deal with what I consider to be the more minor issue. Clearly, the primary issue here and the one that deserves support is the fact that right now there really isn't an effective way of dealing with an elected official that really seriously abuses their position. And typically the incidents we've seen across the province, unfortunately, are sexual harassment and fairly severe sexual harassment. And all you can do right now under the current legislation, as you know, is dock their pay for like 90 days. And in the several examples we have across the province, that clearly was not effective because the counselor in those cases just kept doing it. And it was like, it's outrageous. And so I can very gladly and wholeheartedly support this resolution. It certainly is much needed. And I know the concern has been that it could lead to the removal of an elected official. And our system has been based on making it really hard to remove an elected official so they're free to express their opinions and viewpoints, not being concerned about, next week someone's going to toss them from office. Kind of similar to what the protection judges have, so that you're not worried about expressing yourself. But unfortunately, in the cases we've seen across the province, luckily few in number, when someone really seriously abuses that trust that's in them as elected official, they should pay the ultimate consequence and penalty. And under this system would actually be a judge that would do it. So I can very happily and with much good intent support this, even though I think it could be improved slightly.
Seeing no further Counselor McCreary.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. People watching this should not be worried about the corporation of the city of Brantford's robust health and safety, sexual harassment and code of conduct regulations, because we are perhaps an industry leader. This is supporting a province of Ontario initiative to bring the same kind of controls and safeguards to other communities as the city of Brantford employs. I don't particularly like the process that could lead to a councillor being removed from his or her office, because I think that can lead to abuse. I think the only body that should be able to remove a councillor from office is an aware electorate following a number of miscreant offenses. But I do believe that this probably is worthwhile to allow the province of Ontario to further govern communities who don't really give a darn. And the mayor was quite correct that there are some egregious examples, and including some where the folks continue to get reelected. And I think first and foremost in my mind is my absolute faith in the government of the province of Ontario to not misstep.
Thank you. And seeing no further speakers in line, we'll call the vote on this.
Item 8.1 carries unanimously on a recorded vote of 11-0. Members of council voting in favor, Councilors Van Toborg, Samuel Hunt, Carpenter, McCreary, Marnes, Slash, Caputo, Sullivan, Sokoli, and Mayor Davis.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. Now, before we move forward, I'm going to take just a 5-minute break. If everyone's okay with that. Thank you. Okay, we have quorum, so I'll call the meeting back to order. Moving forward, the committee will now consider the items that were separated for discussion purposes. Counselor Sless, I do believe you have the motion to place all separated items on the floor. And state your seconder, please.
You are correct, Madam Chair. Councillor Caputo, that all items for consideration / consent items 7.1 and 7.2 separated for discussion purposes be approved.
Thank you so much. And first, because we had a delegate to the Brant Historical Society, we'll take up item 7.1.3 first. Anyone to speak to that one? Counselor Carpenter.
Yes, I'm fully in support of this. It's important that we have a museum. The history of Brantford is very important. Being one of the four major cities in the country that provided the economic development for the city, for the country, shows the history of this community, how rich in history we are. And keeping the museum alive and well is very important to us. You don't remember your history, you're going to make mistakes going forward. But remembering your history, you can be proud of what Brantford used to be and what it can be again. So I just want to congratulate the new board that's been put together and the leadership that's been shown here, and thankful that you did show up to basically save our museum. So thank you very much for that, and we'll do everything we can to make sure our museum stays in the city of Brantford and funded well. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have Counselor Samwell.
Thank you. And through you, I just wanted to say that I'm thrilled to be supporting this tonight as well. The museum is a very important part of our community that maybe not everybody knows as much as they should. So every time I have the opportunity, I'd like to tell people to visit the museum. And I look forward to what you guys are going to do in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Hunt.
Thank you. And just to the three of you who came today, I spent a lot of years in the not-for-profit sector. So I understand the concept of stepping in and finding out, what do we do now? So for stepping forward and bringing your valuable expertise to the table, thank you for that. I too am also glad to support this. I think it's one of those things where at some point you've got to right the ship. And that really is kudos to you for coming forward with some kind of vision to do just that. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor McCreary.
Madam Chair, thank you. Being in a heritage building, and heritage is a modifier which doesn't bestow upon that building its true nature, which is in desperate need of big reinvestment to continue to operate the museum in that building. They operate a pretty skinny chicken across the street across from Old City Hall. This is a stopgap measure that's before us tonight. It allows these folks to continue to operate into the short to medium term. When one looks at the amount of money that the city of Brantford currently provides with respect to municipal support for, as what Councillor Carpenter said, is a significant guardianship of our heritage and history. We just don't contribute enough. And going forward, getting beyond this stopgap measure, our finger just being in the hole of the dike as it is, it's imperative that the city of Brantford finds a way to partner with the Brant Museum and Archives to kind of get us to the point where Canadian Military Heritage Museum is. They enjoy remarkable success in terms of telling their story because they live in a city of Brantford owned and operated building. And we provide continuous support in that respect. So that museum group is able to devote all of its energy, all of its philanthropy, all of its resources to telling their military story. And I see the future for the Brant Museum and Archives in very much the same way. I believe this organization needs to be in a city of Brantford operated and owned facility to allow them the same level playing field as the Military Heritage Museum enjoys in terms of devoting all their resources, all their energy, everything they've got into telling the story of Brantford's heritage and history. We've got 15 or 20,000 artifacts in there. Some of them we don't know who they're connected to, what they are. We make discoveries over there every day about documents and little bits of history that people come in and tell us about. There's a bright future ahead, and I'm hopeful as we get into 2025 and beyond that there's a way for us to partner with the Brant Museum and Archives to allow them the same sort of opportunity as we have with our other partner, and to allow our story to be told in a way that's better funded, better resourced, and this community deserves it. And so does this organization. As Councillor Carpenter said, thank you very much for stepping up and taking leadership positions. We've always worried, and our worries now are somewhat abated.
Did you have your hand up? Oh, just stretching. Okay. Seeing no further speakers in the queue, we'll call the vote.
Councillor Slesser, just waiting for your vote.
Yes.
Item 7.1.3 carries unanimously on recorded votes. Members of council voting in favor are as follows: Councillors Van Tilburg, Samuel, Hunt, Carpenter, McCreary, Martin, Celeste, Caputo, Sullivan, Sokoli, and Mayor Davis.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Always a comedian. Decorum. Up next, we have item 7.1.1. Councillor Samuel, you asked for this to be separated. The floor is yours.
Through you, Madam Chair. So I do have, I did want to bring a deferral forward, but if anybody else wants to speak to it first, or if you want me just to go ahead.
Are you I think,
Just go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I'd like to defer this item to the council meeting because it hasn't had consultation with the Heritage Committee, and I know that's coming up the day before council. It said that in the report, but I'd like to defer this decision until we've heard from the Heritage Committee.
So you're looking, I have a seconder. for the
Sorry, yeah,
deferral.
seconded by, yeah.
And so
Councillor
you're
Curry.
looking to defer this to August council meeting.
Yep, that's correct.
And we can't speak to that, so we can't speak to a deferral, correct, other than the time and the place. So the only discussion we can have is to time and place. Councillor Hunt?
I'm just wondering if the Heritage Committee meeting is the day before council, if time of August 27th is sufficient.
Is there a staff person here who can let us know the date of the Heritage? Thank you.
Through the chair of the committee, Alan Waterfield, manager of long range planning. The next municipal heritage committee is on Monday, August the 26th, which is the day before the council meeting on the 27th. So as we mentioned in the report, we'll quickly prepare a memo that will be distributed to council to advise what happened at the heritage committee the night previous.
Thank you so much. I trust that satisfies the question. We'll call the vote on the deferral.
The deferral of item 7.1.1 carries on recorded vote of 7-4. Members of council voting in favor: Councillors Sluss, McCreary, Hunt, Van Tilburg, Samuel, Martin, Mayor Davis. Members opposed: Councillors Sullivan, Sokoli, Caputo, and Carpenter.
Beautiful. Moving forward, we've already addressed our resolution, so we do have some notice of motions.
Madam
We
Chair.
have,
Can we just, I didn't move the deferral. I just see it, it's got my name on it now, but it was Councillor Samuel that moved the deferral on that. item.
so just point of clarification, got that? Perfect, thank you. Item 7.1.2 was not separated for the individual that hold that out. Okay, moving forward to notice of motions. Counselor McCreary, I understand you want to bring forward a motion to waive the rules on your notice of motion. So I'll have you read that out, including the entire resolution as well as your seconder, please.
Seconder is Counselor Martin. Waive the rules. Motion to waive the rules to consider item 9.1 as a resolution. Whereas the Crystal Cottage was relocated from its original property, 35 Chatham Street to 53 Charlotte Street to conserve its heritage value in the face of demolition and redevelopment. And whereas the developer did not complete the restoration of the Crystal Cottage following the relocation, and the task of restoration fell to the Brant Historical Society. And whereas the Brant Historical Society, despite limited resources, completed some work to the Crystal Cottage to install the building on the foundation at 53 Charlotte Street, but the restoration remains incomplete. And whereas a new owner has bought the Crystal Cottage from the Brant Historical Society to complete the renovation of the building. And whereas the restoration of the Crystal Cottage would benefit from additional potential uses added by way of minor zoning bylaw amendment, and may require the amendment of the existing approved site plan, which is registered on title of 53 Charlotte Street. And whereas the foregoing Planning Act applications require the payment of a fee, which creates a draw on funds that otherwise could go directly to the restoration of the Crystal Cottage. Now therefore be it resolved that the application fee for any minor zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by the current owner to add a single use to 53 Charlotte Street be waived, and that the application fee for any site plan amendment application for 53 Charlotte Street submitted by the current owner be waived.
Any conversation pertaining to the motion to waive the rules only? Seeing none, I'll take an opportunity to speak to it. I won't be supporting a waiving of the rules. I think there's no urgency to this resolution, so I won't be supporting the waiving of the rules. We'll call the vote.
Motion to waive the rules carries on recorded vote of 8-3 with the required 2/3. Members of committee voting in favor are as follows: Councilors Sullivan, Celeste, McCurry, Van Tokorp, Samuel, Carpenter, Martin, Caputo. Members opposed, Councilors Sokoli, Hunt, and Mayor Davis.
Councillor McCurry, I'll ask you to put it on the motion on the floor, state your seconder. We won't make you read the whole thing again. Just the
My
title.
seconder is Counselor Martin, and I'm relieved not to have to read the whole thing again. It is quite wordy. And I would like to thank staff for adding all those words for me, because it was most helpful. So before you is sort of maybe the last step in terms of the attention that this community has paid to conserving this valuable heritage resource. We now have, and the folks are with us tonight. The Browns are here with us tonight to hear us debate this issue. So we now have an owner who's capable and competent to take this to the finish line. And what this does is it allows the flexibility for the current owner to be able to finish the building in a way that will make it appealable, maybe as a commercial site, maybe as a residential site, but it gives them the flexibility without having to pay a fee to have that ability to market it to those two types of future use. And I will remind members of committee that it's been our practice on this project to make sure that we waive city fees, because the city is a partner, a full partner in this all the way through city heritage, the Brant Historical Society, and now the Browns. And we are simply continuing in the vein in which we embarked upon this to make sure that we do not provide any impediments and that we facilitate this project to its conclusion, and to make sure that it goes to loving new owners once restored. And I would appreciate everybody's support on this tonight. And I hope that ideologies will not get in the way of embracing a community project and some pretty good folks that are now the stewards of this property.
Councillor Carpenter.
Yes, I will support this. I would like to see an amendment. And the reason I would like to see an amendment is because when there was presentations from then the museum, to this council, I asked for the information on the financial accountability and I was promised that, but that never did come forward. So I'd like to add an amendment to item C to this, if it's accepted, that the city provide members of the council and the public a full financial accountability of the city's involvement in this project.
I see that seconded by. Oh, I'm unsure if that's germane to what we're doing here. Decisions. You know what? I don't think that seeing. I think we're comparing apples and oranges. This is now owned by a new owner and a different individual in the community, and I don't think it's appropriate that this resolution be bogged down with how much money the city has put into this project prior to this point. So I'm going to rule that out of order.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll ask staff directly then.
Thank you. Thank you. Mayor Davis.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Recently, I visited the Crystal Cottage and have seen many other works that that has been done by this fine couple in our community, preserving historical buildings and doing, frankly, an outstanding job of it. But at the same time, we do have policies and procedures here for good reason. And I have a number of questions and concerns that I think need to be answered. And unfortunately, when you do these motions at the last minute without staff input, we don't really have the full picture here. And I have several questions I'm wondering if staff might be able to answer. One is, the request is to waive the fees on a minor zoning application. I'd like to know how long would that application take? And two, we're about to pass a comprehensive zoning bylaw likely in September. And would that address this issue and make it unnecessary to bring a minor zoning application? And two, I've got a question about bonusing. You know, we've done this in the past, waive fees. Generally, we've done it where the city made a mistake and or changed midstream rules and procedures. And we've done in those situations, we waive fees. We've also waived fees in situations of extreme financial hardship. And so we do have the bonusing provisions in the municipal act. And so I'd like staff, if they could comment on those issues.
Through the chair to Mayor Davis, Nicole Wilmot, Chief Planner and Director of Planning and Development Services. So with respect to the timing of the application, staff did intend to add this use through the new zoning bylaw, which is coming forward in September to a special meeting of council on September 17th. And so what we are looking at is adding a single family use to the current zoning, which would allow for the cottage to be used for that purpose. And so from that perspective, staff intended to address this use. However, if the owners of the cottage wish to proceed sooner and initiate a private application, then they can do that. In order to process a private application, now we have not received one as of yet. There is some work involved in preparing that application, but from a processing standpoint, staff would be looking at processing the application within a 2 to 3 month period. So in that regard, the zoning bylaw is intended to come forward prior to when we would be able to bring forward a privately initiated application to which we have yet not received.
And the issue of bonusing, could add some help on that.
Not provide legal advice in an open session forum, but what I can say is that the bonusing provisions of the Municipal Act do not apply to just individuals. They do apply to businesses, corporations, institutions, etc. And so in the case that would be here with respect to Mr. Brown, the property, as I understand it, is owned by the individual. So in this particular instance, those municipal provisions with respect to the act may not be applicable with regard to what's on the floor before you tonight.
And my last question to staff, is it really necessary to do a minor site plan amendment?
So through the chair to Mayor Davis, we have not had the opportunity as of yet to sit down and fully understand the plans to which the applicants want to revise the property. So I'm not confident based on the information that I know whether or not a site plan amendment would be necessary. I can say that if they want to use the property for a use that is not currently permitted in the zoning bylaw, then we would need to reassess that. There would be a registered site plan on title for a commercial use. So we would look at some of the provisions such as some of the building requirements as some of the exterior improvements as well.
I use my time. All right, so strikes me that this motion is premature. That's why I voted against dealing with this tonight on the basis of 12 hours notice at that. And I think it's an example of why it is we have our notice of motion because we get this information. So I'm going to suggest that we defer this to August 27th so we can get some additional information to be able to answer these questions. And it sounds like it may not even be necessary. So is this a performative motion? I don't know.
Are you putting a deferral on the?
Yes, I am.
Okay, do we have a seconder?
Point of order. I believe somebody was trying to say intent and motives, and that should be retracted.
Would you like to apologize? No. Yeah, I can see where Councillor Van Tilburg is coming from, so I'd ask that you apologize for making comments that could be seen as.
That was a comment in respect to the motion itself, not the reason for bringing it. But if the person moving it is offended, I apologize.
I'll take that. Are you so there was a deferral. Has anyone seconded the deferral? Councillor Carpenter has seconded the deferral, so any conversation from here on out must be about time or place, and we had suggested that this be deferred to our August council meeting. Any discussion on the deferral? Councillor Carpenter.
In support of time, the mayor suggests that we send this to the council meeting where it would have to go for finalization anyways. This way we get more information at the time.
Correct. Thank you for clarifying. And we'll call the vote on the deferral.
The deferral carries on a recorded vote of 9-2. Members of the committee voting in favor, Councillors Sullivan, Celeste, Hunt, Van Tilburg, Samuel, Carpenter, Marn, Sokoli, Mayor Davis. Members opposed, Councillors McCreary and Caputo.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. If you'd read the title of your notice of motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You did a fine job tonight. Echo Park, Gray Street.
Perfect. Please note that the notice of motion deadline for the council agenda is Thursday, August 22nd at 9 a.m. sharp. This meeting is now adjourned.